Well, I'm so pleased to have Ken Dombrowski back again. Uh, Ken is one of our favorites. I'm sorry to say it's on recording now, so we all know. Um, Ken, he having a passion for real estate, neighborhoods, home renovation, and DIY projects. Ken decided to transition his career a few years ago to become a successful Chicagoland realtor, working with Baird and Warner. During this transition journey, Ken has grown a more significant awareness of Chicago's rich history, including its unique architecture, places, legendary stories, and movies linked to Chicago and its surrounding areas. And Ken has presented for us some wonderful topics on Chicago architecture as well as Chicago movies and architecture and movies and all of it. It's just wonderful. So I'm so looking forward to tonight talking about Art Deco. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for that nice introduction. I always enjoy your introductions. And I'm always excited to be back and talk about some different topics. So thanks, everybody, for joining in. So today we're going to explore the Chicago's Art Deco architecture and buildings. And I'm going to tell a little bit about a little bit of a story of Art Deco, how it came about first, kind of a little history around different arts and history of Chicago going on. And then I've got some hopefully really fantastic illustrations and photos for you. We're going to explore the city and show you a lot of things dealing with Art Deco. First of all, Chicago's got quite a influence with Art Deco and design, being a big city as it is. But Art Deco it pretty much was all over America, even in small towns, medium-sized towns. The largest population of Art Deco is actually in Miami, Florida. New York City is next. Chicago's third, and then Los Angeles kind of are the top rankers here. But first, what I wanted to talk about through is kind of give you a good understanding of what actually is Art Deco. And Art Deco is kind of a short for a French word called arts décoratifs, and it's a style of visual arts, architecture, and product design that first appeared in Paris in the 1910s, just before World War I, and it flourished internationally during the 1920s and 1930s. Art Deco has influenced buildings from skyscrapers, but it's even influenced bridges and automobiles and furniture, fashions and household items. And interesting in Chicago, after the Chicago fire, the traditional architecture that was being built at the time was called the Beaux Arts style, the kind of Romanesque style. This was taught in Paris, France, at their school of École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. That's how it's got its name. And it was very predominant, established style of architecture in Europe as well as in America, starting from the 1830s through the early 20th century. So Chicago took a big role in this because a lot of rebuilding had to be done after the Chicago fire. And Beaux Arts, buildings, they typically employed the rich, bold, classical types of ornamentation. But with the advent of modern skyscraper materials, buildings needed to be much greater heights. It began to call into question the established way to design and ornament a building. It kind of needed to change. So during this time period in the early 20s, there was an evolution going on with different art techniques in the world occurring through the world that kind of paved way for the Art Deco style. And the first evolutionary one was really tied to what's referred to as Cubism. Cubism is one of the most influential visual art styles of the early 20th century, and it was created by Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque, a Frenchman, in Paris between 1907 and 1914. The classic example of this Cubism in Chicago is the picture up in the upper right-hand corner there of our Chicago Picasso. And here is some renderings and visions of what pretty much Cubism looked at. The Cubism painter, they rejected the inherited concepts that art should copy nature, and and not they should not adapt to the traditional techniques of perspective and models. So they created a whole different type of fractured objects and different geometric forms in a lot of what became that early modern art. In addition to this, in Europe, uh, there was a big boom going with our Art Nouveau, and Art Nouveau kind of developed in the 1880s and prior to World War One in Western Europe and USA. It was inspired by nature and kind of characteristics of being curvy and turning lines. Here's some beautiful illustrations of what Art Nouveau was all about. It was a movement that kind of developed across the visual arts and aimed away again, breaking from that traditional art. With the Art Nouveau came the formation of what's called the Vienna succession, and this took it to a whole different level. There's a picture there of Gustav Klimt in the lower left-hand corner there, and pretty much this got formed in 1897, and it marked quite accurately kind of the formal beginning of modern art in Europe, the modern art in Austria. And Austria at the time was noted for its attachment to very highly conservative tradition. So Gustav was taking art to a whole different level here in adapting whole different concept. These were these were artistic influences that were going to tie into the creation of the Art Deco, but there were actually three main influences or catalysts that really changed in artistic expression at the time. And the first one, it was the World War One from 1914 to 1918. And the First World War kind of changed everything. It was a global war that kind of lasted through that time period. And it ended a century of peace, of unprecedented prosperity in Europe. And it resulted directly in the deaths of more than 20 million people. The war was a significant turning point in political, cultural, economic, and social climates of the world. And it actually toppled four empires, redrew the map of Europe, and ushered in the emergence of America as a global power. But the war really had a lasting impact on society. The optimism that marked the period at the turn of the 20th century was kind of swept away. Across Europe, it had seen as a failure of the established order. And after the war, the establishment was just rejected in every way. So this impacted every aspect of society, including music, including dance, fashion, art, and architecture. People no longer looked at the past with nostalgia at this point. They looked at to the future to kind of embrace something that was new. The next influence came in 1922 with the infamous, it was called the Chicago Tribune competition. And in 1922, there was a design competition held by the Chicago Tribune to basically design their new headquarters building that was going to be located at Michigan Avenue and Chicago River at the time. And, you know, Chicago was a center of American architectural philosophy because a lot of the key architects came here to start influencing Chicago and rebuilding it from the Great Chicago Fire. And at the time, there was a considerable media attention drawn to this competition. It attracted 260 architects from around the world vying for a $100,000 grand prize. The influence of Chicago architecture came through what's called the Chicago School, and some of the most notable styles of architectures to emerge came through the school. And this kind of originated the architectural expression that was based on applying new technologies, new innovations, and new ways of economic demands and social concerns of how you basically design a city and how you design its buildings. These key architects in the school, mainly Louis Sullivan, they began to really openly advocate for a different style of architecture that was needed, and they didn't rely so heavily on obvious classical European influence at the time. They needed something that was more practical and something that would approach the new American style. And Thus, out of the competition came a winning design. Here's the three first prize, second prize, and third prize from that Chicago Tribune competition. And the winning design over on the left was a John Howells and Raymond Hood design. And their design kind of entailed it was a Gothic tower, a visual look with strong vertical lines and a buttress on top. It was kind of inspired by the Cathedral of Rouen in France. And this was really the basis for what the Chicago Tribune looks like today. Um, you can kind of see here some old pictures of the building of the Chicago Tribune. Picture on the left there, and over on the right, the far right, that Tribune Tower next to the Wrigley Building at the time. The one that was really a remarkable win was the second place version, and the second place version was a Finnish architect by the name of Elio Saarinen, and he influenced kind of a soaring Gothic vertical Gothic lines, and he kind of reinvented and modernized it by actually employing a series of setbacks in the faces of the building rising from the street. It was this design that much of the architectural future profession of the Art Deco was going to be taking off to kind of look at as this. And the interesting thing about the setback designs is they were not just visual in nature, but they would also allow people in the building that were looking out the windows not to get that extreme height or having vertigo and looking downward to the street, because you would be looking downward and you could kind of see those steps as you kind of went down. Over on the right was a third prize designed by Halliburton and Root. Not as detailed out, but it has some similarities in shape in that particular prize winner. And the third influencer pretty much came in 1925 with the Paris Exposition it's called 1925. And this name of this Art Decoratifs, basically, this exposition was called the International Exhibition of Modern, Decorative, and Industrial Arts, held in Paris. And in French, that would be the Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels Modernes. It was conceived as a way to highlight the new styles of art, architecture, furniture, decorative arts, and industrial design that was emerging in Europe at the time throughout the world. And the organizers of this exposition, they made it very clear that the purpose of the event was to only spotlight and exhibit new modern designs. And nobody was going to be looking at anything like revival styles of the past. There were 15,000 exhibitors from 20 countries present with more than 16 million visitors to the exposition. So this in itself really helped define the Art Deco. And in addition to that, there were some major influencers that I'm going to talk about in the art field of Art Deco. What's interesting too, kind of an interesting trivia thing, is that the name Art Deco actually didn't come until 1960, in 1960s, with a French book called Art Deco by Bavis Hillier that was talking about the art decoratifs. But that's how the term got Art Deco, kind of came more starting in the 1960s with this book. Some influential artists in Art Deco was Tamara de Lempicka. She was one of the most admired and most recognizable Art Deco artists. She was born in Poland and she settled in Paris, and she lived the lifestyle of the 1920 Parisian socialites. And she painted portraits, many prominent figures in Art Deco style, and it brought the painter critical acclaim and fame. René Lalique, he was actually a master glass designer and jeweler, and he's probably the world's most famous glass art designer, whose legacy is still strong today, and his pieces are favored by collectors. Lalique became one of the most prized jewelry designers, working for the leading French jewelers like Cartier and Boucheron. But in the 1920s, René Lalique actually adopted the tendencies of the emerging Art Deco style. And Erte, over on the right, his full name was Romain de Tirtov. He's probably one of the best-known Art Deco fashion designers. He became one of the most influential fashion designers and illustrators in Paris at that time. And for 2 decades, he actually worked on covers of Harper's Bazaar magazine and appeared in other leading fashion magazines like Vogue and Cosmopolitan. So before we start looking at examples, I think it's important to kind of understand like what are really the characteristics of Art Deco? What are we looking for that makes it Art Deco? So characteristics are kind of geometric and symmetrical designs. It's a streamlined look created through what's called chevrons. And that chevron is actually a V shape or an inverted V. Different type of step forms in buildings, zigzags and sharp angles. There's a huge vertical emphasis with Art Deco architecture. There's strong vertical lines and there's tiered setbacks that are featured in many of the structures. A lot of them are built with very luxurious materials. Art Deco is all about extravagance in materials. And this would be exotic woods, marbles from around the world, stainless steels, different type of chromes and glass, different type of platings, gold platings, and even plastic. And a lot of vibrant colors and contrasts. There's rich hues, gold, silvers, and deep blues added to the decorative appeal of Art Deco. And the ornamentation with contemporary motifs, they created a future aesthetic appearance and some kind of figures of nature like sunbursts or like stylized flower motifs would come into play with Art Deco. And it also was very common to find a very stylized organic form mixed in with the geometrics, like fern tendrils, flowers of all kinds, even fountains were very common. So during its heyday, Art Deco represented luxury, it represented glamour, exuberance, and faith in social and technological progress. And there were also unique regional elements that would vary in regions by the different countries. Another huge influencing factor that pretty much tied directly into the Art Deco movement, believe it or not, was actually the discovery of Tutankhamun in 1922. And history-wise, back in November of 1922, deep below the sands of the Valley of the Kings, up there on the upper right, you have British archaeologist Howard Carter and his excavators actually found the steps that would lead to the discovery of the over 3,000-year-old tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. As the exquisite beauty and richness of more than 5,000 grave goods were revealed, the world was memorized. Mass media went crazy. The world was memorized. And the term Egyptomania kind of swept the globe. It kind of created iconography and symbolism with both the Egyptian influence and Art Deco influence by using of symbolic imagery, motifs like lotus flowers, sphinxes, the Eye of Horus. They all found their way into the designs of Art Deco buildings, creating a sense of mystery and exoticism. And architectural marvels, just like ancient Egypt, when you look at the temples and the pyramids, some of the architectural models kind of try to frame that monumental structure kind of in a similar form to ancient Egypt. The most notable architect for Art Deco in America was actually a gentleman by the name of William Van Allen, and he was from New York City. And the biggest example, the most famous example of the Art Deco style is actually the Chrysler building there shown, which is built in New York City at the time. You can kind of see all the elements of step back, vertical columns, and also a very elaborate top motif, kind of bold colors there with the Chrysler building. And another claim to fame was it was pretty much the Empire State Building, and that had a lot of Art Deco classifications and categories, both outside and inside. And claim to fame there, that became the tallest building in the world. But we're going to focus on our iconic Chicago here, and we're going to talk about different Chicago styles of Art Deco. And we're going to start looking at specific buildings as examples here. based on the characteristics of Art Deco. The most notable architectural firm in Chicago that designed a lot of the Art Deco designs was actually the firm of Halliburton Roche. And later they brought on John Root Jr. As an architect. And John Root Jr. was the son of a famous John Root who did a lot of the classic Beaux Art style architecture in Chicago. But these people really influenced the Art Deco design. Here's a picture of that whole group of architects from that firm as they are standing in an abandoned area getting ready to build an enormous Art Deco building. So the first building we're going to talk about here is located at 333 North Michigan. And this one is actually on the southeast corner of Michigan Avenue and the Chicago River. The building's base here, if you look at the base, it's kind of sheathed in polished granite in shades of black and purple. And the upper stories are kind of set back a little bit in dramatic fashion with some buff-colored limestone, with some hints of some dark terracotta. And the step-back design kind of recalls that second place winner in the Chicago Tribune competition. Its vertical columns and windows, dark recessed terracotta spandrels, kind of combined to accentuate the building's soaring verticality of the building here. This was actually dramatically sited where Michigan Avenue crosses the Chicago River, and this was the fourth of the corner buildings that were built all in different architectural styles. So the other corners, the first build there was the northwest corner. There was the Wrigley Building, built in 1921. The Tribune Tower competition was actually built in 1923. That would be on the northeast corner. And then on the southwest corner is what's referred to as the London House, a famous building there with a Beaux Arts curvilinear style. And so the fourth building came about with the 333 North Michigan. And if you notice the Art Deco design over on the upper right there, on the fifth floor, there is actually what's referred to as a frieze. And what a frieze is it's actually a horizontal type of artistic sculpture or rendering. And if you can kind of see it there in the upper right there on the fifth floor, there's a frieze there that's related to early pioneer life. It's kind of befitting a building. This building is actually located on the site of where Fort Dearborn was, so the frieze is kind of befitting to that. But among the images that are depicted here are a hunter, an Indian, a pioneer woman, kind of the struggle of pioneer life, and the missionaries. Those are things that you probably pass this every day. You never saw that. Next time you're down there on that corner, you should take a look at the frieze there. Here's the exterior of the building on the left. You can kind of see the Art Deco influence there. A lot of the golds, contrasting in black, a lot of verticals, polished metal material. Even if you look at the light fixtures, very Art Deco. There's like a lot of verticals in the light fixtures. You can kind of see that fern pattern there. And over on the right, when you go inside, is the beautiful elevator lobby. And here you can kind of see some influences with that whole Tutankhamun. Some beautiful renderings there on the elevator doors. You have the kind of black marble in that lobby. Definitely Art Deco. If you actually get a closer view, here's the details of those elevator doors. Just beautiful, and you can kind of even see the lighting fixtures all tying into the Art Deco theme. And even over on the left here, inside the elevator itself, you can see the paneling in contrast with some vertical gold and kind of a gold-plated little sculpture, artistic sculpture of a bird in there. That's definitely Art Deco. And what was interesting in the time, all of the old buildings over on the right, they all had a central mail system, no longer used today, but in that central mail system, they basically did all the designs in kind of that Art Deco influence there. You can kind of see the colors are matching, the metallic the decorative trim there, all occurring there. The next example is actually called the Chicago Motor Club, which is at 66 East Wacker Place. And the Motor Club is actually one of the smaller of the Halliburton Route Art Deco buildings. It's just 48 feet wide and 15 stories. But if you notice on the right, there's a lot of geometric motifs and stylish flowers, plants, and birds that are actually embedded with the limestone and with the facade. And it's kind of projecting kind of in a bay that kind of rises just above the entrance there. And over on the left, you can kind of get a good picture of how stylish those motifs are, very Art Deco. And over on the right, the bay window, you can kind of see that vertical influence of Art Deco there when you look up in the building. The cornerstone, even here in the lower left, that indicates Chicago Motor Club, basically is showing that Art Deco influence there. And trying to blow up a little bit on the right are just, you can kind of just see how much detail there are in the paneling that goes up the sides of that building. Inside of this building is actually a beautifully restored 3-story lobby that sports different geometric moldings, a patterned terrazzo floor, Art Deco chandeliers, and this was completely renovated. One of the good things that's happening in Chicago is a lot of these buildings are historic landmark status. So there are a lot of these buildings, especially the Art Deco ones, are now being renovated to actually replicate the what it looked like when it was first introduced. In this multi-million-dollar renovation, it actually included an installation of a balcony there, mezzanine balcony, holding a 1928 Ford Model A car right there to kind of highlight that Chicago Motor Club influence. This building was used for offices following the club's departure in the 1980s. And after that, there was unsuccessful condominium conversion in the early 2000s. And this building really stood vacant for a long time, but it reopened in 2015, and it's now actually the Hampton Inn of Chicago downtown. And one of the interesting parts of the redecoration is they restored this bar area. You can just see the vintage Art Deco with the bar. You can look at the light fixtures. If you notice the verticals on the wall, the vertical pattern going up the side of the bar. And also, there's actually was an historic mural that was done at the time when it was opened in 1928 that was showing the country's 19 national highways and along with kind of a principal city and all the national parks. That was completely refurbished as well to tie into the look of the Art Deco motif. Here's an example of the elevator lobbies on the left in that building. Definitely, you can see the vertical patterns. You can see the polished materials in contrast to the wall, in contrast to the floor. Also on the right, that's kind of a close-up of that wall that you see in the bar area, but definitely very strong Art Deco influence. The next building we're going to talk about here is Century Tower. And this is at 182 West Lake Street. And this is a stunning landmark. It was built in 1930, and it was originally the Trustee System Service Bank building. And at the time of the construction, this was the tallest reinforced concrete building in the world. If you notice here, there's a lot of intricate details and a lot of sculptures right into the limestone, the gray limestone brick. If you look further up at the top, you see those vertical line influences making that Art Deco, and the little patterns and little portraits here. Uh, they're kind of depicting Chicago life of Chicago laborers, Chicago commerce. Uh, all those are symbolic of what these renderings are. And a close up here, you can kind of see that it's accentuated with these vertical black metallic uh, vertical elements here. And it looks like almost a stained glass window, but what those are is those are actually metallic type grills that are artistically designed, uh, shown on the inside lobby here that I'll show you in a minute. But this is kind of the look of the panels on the left and the right when you get a little bit of a closer shot. And then once you go inside, just beautiful. You look back out towards the outside and you see these metal grills, and what you see is actually silhouettes of different types of Chicago workers. It all depicts the Chicago life of a lot of Chicago laborers, and all done in a very Art Deco type of style. And the marble, this is the reddish hue there on the left and right, is actually Algerian marble from Algeria. And once you get into the lobby, it's just amazing. There's this beautiful grand staircase that's been completely renovated, with the polished Algerian marble on each side of the hallway. You can kind of see the grandness. You've got some artistic renderings of the laborers on the left and right side, and also the polished gold going up the staircase here. Just a beautiful piece of Art Deco here. The next one here is the Bankers Building at 105 North LaSalle, and this is known as the Clark Adams Building. And this, interestingly enough, this is one of 6 downtown high-rises that are actually being recreated into apartment complexes. There's been so much abandonment downtown with businesses going down. Chicago is starting to renovate and putting in apartment buildings for people to kind of live there, making it kind of like a city center. But if you notice the intricate details on the right there of the facade, a lot of interesting, very strong details of Art Deco designs embedded right into the walls of the limestone. Kind of an awning here that's got a kind of an Art Deco flair to it above the 105 sign. And inside the building, just beautiful examples here of Art Deco in the elevator lobby on the left. You can kind of see the vertical Art Deco patterns there. Also, if you notice up on the wall are a little kind of square sculpture pieces between the elevator doors. And then up running along the top, you can see a beautiful gold border with all like different detail in it. You can kind of see that detail a little bit better over on the right picture up at the top. And you can tell that this building was kind of has a bank look with the metallic grills there, and how the old banks used to look with the staircase. You can kind of see Art Deco with the light fixtures as well. Also, the annex of the building, the hallways of the building, have all been renovated to its original Art Deco style. And here is a beautiful example of using those polished stainless steel and kind of chrome plating to really create the vertical effects and horizontal effects, both with this perspective. You can kind of see the columns to the left and to the right, how they have the vertical feel going up to the ceiling there. And it kind of accents a historical Art Deco type of clock that's in the middle there, that's shown on the right with the border in the trim. Just a real beautiful building. We're going to talk a little bit about Art Deco in kind of the retailing, distribution, and entertainment business for very large people, very large buildings here. And the first example is actually the famous Merchandise Mart. And Merchandise Mart is basically the colossal monolith building that you see along the Chicago River. I'm sure most of you have seen this one, but in the Roaring Twenties, this was the major conglomerate retail for Marshall Field and Company, and it was a revolutionary concept that basically had centralized offices, marketplaces, places for wholesale goods and complete retailing from Marshall Fields and Company. And at that time, the nickname came called the Mart in more recent years. But at that time, this Merchandise Mart was the largest building in the world, basically by floor space and by square footage of floor space. Its imposing Art Deco facade kind of adjourned with geometric patterns and stylized eagles that reflect the area's optimism and grandeur. It's hard to pick up the details. You can kind of see them in the right up along that side picture. Just a lot of detail going into this building. And this was the largest building in the world all the way up until 1943, when the Pentagon was built. When the Pentagon was built in 1943, that became the largest square footage building. Unfortunately, the Great Depression kind of threw a wrench in this Mart's success with retailing, and there was some issues where the marketing was kind of dwindling into the 30s and 40s. So actually, it was used during the World War II as a manufacturing facility for different war materials to support the war from 1939 to 1945. And then in 1945, actually, the Kennedy family acquired the Merchandise Mart, ushering in a new ownership area to look into like fashion retailing and fashion outlets. And it operated that way for a very, very long time. Here's examples of, this is a more simpler form of Art Deco on the inside of the Merchandise Mart. On the left, you can kind of see the glossy marble patterns in the flooring. Again, vertical columns on the left and right. You can kind of see the light fixtures. And then also along the ceiling, you can see a lot of detailed pattern on the left and right running along that ceiling. One of the foyers there on the right with that Art Deco feel to it. Beautiful elevator lobbies in that building. You can really see the zigzag patterns, the V patterns, the diamond patterns all coming together for Art Deco. If you notice the light fixtures as well, just beautiful depictions on how that light is going up towards the ceiling. And there's a very huge main kind of a hall in there that is really used as kind of a common reception area. And you'll notice that there's vertical columns running along both sides there, a lot of vertical patterns with the light fixtures mounted on there. If you look up towards the ceiling, you'll see a lot of the detailed trim along the ceiling up at the top. And what's interesting is actually these murals were actually refurbished from original paintings of the different ports of call across the entire world are kind of depicted in different paintings, representing kind of retailing and merchandising by actually showing what these are like in the different ports around the world. Here's another shot of the left of the hallway, kind of showing you the columns, and then over on the right, you can kind of see the flare of Art Deco going up the staircase. And then if you notice above the staircase again, you can kind of see how those murals are kind of tying in into that whole square footage area. What a lot of people don't know is that outside the Merchandise Mart is a huge plaza overlooking the river. And this is used, it's for seating, for lunches, And what's very interesting about it, if you notice, there's some figurehead sculptures in bronze up on these uh, these big vertical pedestals, and this depicts actually the founders or the leaders of Chicago retailing. So what you have there is you have the bronze statues of all the famous. You have Marshall Fields, you have Sears Roebuck and Company, Woolworths. All of them are kind of represented kind of as historical monuments to the center of retailing in Chicago. The old post office is kind of interesting. These are shots I pulled off the internet. I'm sorry, they're a little bit grainy. I had to go with the resolution of what I could get from the internet. But the old post office was constructed in 1921. It's a 13-story Art Deco structure, massive in scale. Um, and you probably recognize this if you ever take the 290 Expressway or Congress Expressway going west out of the city. You actually, 290 goes right under this building here. And despite its size and kind of recognition as the National Register of Historic Buildings, the post office actually fell victim to the modernization of the postal delivery system. And it kind of closed down when there were new, more efficient ways to handle mail in different facilities. But during most of the 20th century, every piece of mail that came out in or out of Chicago probably went through this building. And then by the mid 1990s, it was kind of left vacant for years with no plans for its reuse. Well, we're really fortunate now. It basically got redesigned and completely renovated into a beautiful event venue place for weddings, special events. Here's some pictures of the interior. Could not get into the building to do actual pictures. These are pulled off the internet, but you can just see the Art Deco flair. They basically, the vertical hallways, the marble flooring, the light fixtures, venue picks there on the right. And this building is really kind of a multi-purpose building for events. Here's some other shots now of what it looks like inside. It's just incredible what they've done in terms of renovating this building and bringing in a lot of the Art Deco influence that it used to have. And one of the most interesting facets about the building that nobody really knows about is that the square footage is actually equivalent to like 6 acres of land. They've actually converted the complete roof up at the top, the entire 6 acres, into a park, which is called the Meadow. And it would become the nation's largest private rooftop garden. And it's offering a wide variety of active and passive amenities, enabling the rooftop to kind of become a park in itself. Not something you get to see every day because it's up so high, but that's part of the venue offerings there at the old post office. The legendary Civic Opera House is also Art Deco. If you ever look at the Greystone facade of that building, just huge details all the way around the building, dealing with Art Deco patterns. The interior of the building has sort of a Egyptian kind of feel to it in some ways, the way it's stylishly designed between the different hues of color, and it's all represented as part of the Civic Opera House. This building has kind of been beautifully restored 2 times over the years, bringing it back to the original, the way it was restored. The main restorations happened in 1996 and 2013. Taking a little break here briefly from the buildings, I'm just going to kind of highlight to you a slide on Art Deco products. Art Deco is everywhere, and Art Deco is, can still be engaged in. It was that whole artistic category. Here you have examples of the furnitures, the plates, the crystal, automobiles, jewelry, all influenced by Art Deco. Art Deco fashion was used in modeling, especially with the main movie actresses of the day during the 1920s. Over on the left, you have Joan Crawford. Up at the top there, Jean Harlow. You have Carol Lombard, Katharine Hepburn, kind of all in Art Deco fashion, Art Deco flair. Magazines, fashion magazines, Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, used to be very popular back there with the Art Deco fashion. And even Art Deco at the movies. A lot of these movies nobody remembers today. These were the late 1920s, but the film scenes depict a lot of Art Deco scenes, movie scenes. The most famous movie, legendary movie, is Metropolis, which is an Art Deco film by Fritz Lang. That's kind of become a movie classic. A lot of these other movies nobody remembers anymore. Um, the movies are Dancing Daughters from 1928, The Wonder of Women from 1929, The Kiss from 1929, and occasionally in today's movies in the lower right, there's a great depiction of Art Deco. One of the best ones is the remake of the Great Gatsby movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. A lot of Art Deco in that movie. If we start talking a little bit about residential buildings in Chicago, there's really not a lot of inventory of Art Deco residential buildings. And I think one of the reasons was it's because of its extravagance, its elaborate, its expenses. There wasn't a lot of investment in those type of buildings. The main area that has them is actually in the Gold Coast area, which kind of makes sense. So that would be uh, up the line north of the Loop and south of Lincoln Park, up along Lakeshore Drive. Some examples of residential Art Deco in that area. These buildings on the outside don't look very Art Deco-ish, but you can see the shapes on the left. Not very beautiful, but you can kind of see the shaping. Definitely Art Deco. You can kind of see the atrium on the right, how the windows are doing the vertical effect, and how that entryway is all kind of Art Deco style. Inside are individual vintage apartments, kind of hit or miss with the Art Deco influence. Another one similar to that is at 1301 Astor Street. You can kind of see the verticality on the left there and kind of an interesting design there with the dome up on the top of the entranceway there. Some more elaborate Art Deco residence so it's at 1444 North Astor. This one here, you can kind of see that influence with the vertical bay windows, uh, the beautiful metallic patterns of the flowers. In the building itself, there's a lot of like square types of sculptures, kind of depicting different nature scenes. You can kind of see the trim above the windows. A really beautiful building. This one's considered a masterpiece. It's kind of a combination of Art Deco tying into some modernism at this called the Frank Fisher Jr. Apartments at 1209 North State Parkway. And this is a 10-unit building, which is shown in the upper right. But if you really look at the influence of how the vertical glass blocks are done, kind of the metallic gating, this is bringing in a little bit more like a curvy style up through the building itself, kind of tying and hinting into some other modern art, but a lot of different Art Deco elements here. And even with the church, a good example of Art Deco is actually at Loyola University up on Sheridan Road. The beautiful Madonna della Strada Chapel is part of Loyola University. You can kind of see all of the intricate designs on the left, all dealing with how the framework is sculptured. You can see the beautiful entryway that almost has a hint of kind of a Egyptian tomb type of entrance there. If you notice there's like a plaza there that has marble in the front. and that kind of ties into the inside on the right side, the lower right, the bold patterns uh, in the church itself, in the pews, the murals that are going on the left and the right, all tied to that vertical and the boldness of Art Deco. Now it comes to what I talk about here is iconic Chicago Art Deco. And when you really think about it, things that make Chicago iconic, of course, we have a big gangster history, but here's some depictions of Art Deco in gangster pics. Also, Art Deco in the comic books. And Superman and Batman both had a lot of Art Deco flair with their comic books and a lot of linking to Chicago. In the movies, there's been depictions of the Daily Planet being in Chicago, Gotham City being in Chicago, Metropolis, parts of that kind of being in Chicago, and it kind of ties into the whole style of what's called the iconic Chicago Art Deco. And some examples of that here. The first one, which is this beautiful building, Carbide and Carbon building. When you look at it here, it doesn't look like much, especially in the shade, especially in the pictures. And it's amazing though how much detail this building has with Art Deco. As you get closer here, you can kind of see the Carbide. First of all, the Carbide and Carbon building here, it was kind of developed. They developed the first dry cell battery, and they needed a regional headquarters in Chicago to house its rapid business. So this beautiful, dazzling building was built. But you can kind of look at the facade here, and you can kind of start seeing luxurious, polished black granite, kind of green and gold terracotta and gold leaf with bronzish trim all on the outside of this building. It's just really beautiful. Up at the top of this building, before we get to the top, this is polished. This is all polished black granite. It's got the original name still there of Carbide and Carbon across the top. Today, it's actually the Pendry Hotel, so you can kind of see the Pendry there. It's actually the hotel for them. And up at the top, you can just see the beautiful ornamental. It has a beautiful building cap ornamented with genuine 24 karat gold. There's a rumor that the inspirations actually came from a champagne bottle. You can kind of see that, the cap of a champagne bottle before you open it. But over on the left, you can see the metallic grill kind of tying into the framework of the lighting. The top dome, which is very, very hard to see from the sidewalk level, kind of a blow up of it over at the right, kind of some greenish hue up there with the limestone. Over on the left here, you can see that there's actually different patterns that are in the left, to the left and right of the entrance. And you can kind of see the pattern, how it's got the inverted V's, a lot of that Art Deco flair. You can see the beautiful grilling there, kind of blown up on the right there. The inside here, this is the lobby of the Carbide and Carbon building, and you can just see the meticulous details of the elevator doors, how it ties into the ceiling trim and the lighting. They're all very Art Deco. And the lobby over on the left, just a lot of intricate patterns, detailed patterns of different gold, different types of trim. And one thing I forgot to mention is a lot of the buildings, or I mentioned it earlier, a lot of these buildings were the central mailing system for all of the different floors. So a lot of those were actually designed in that Art Deco style, which is like on the lower right there. The next one here is the Palmolive building, and this is another Art Deco gem. It kind of features some stepped back designs. A prominent light beacon is on this building. It was actually originally installed to guide planes into O'Hare, and it's got a lot of sleek linear form. detailing the beautiful marble there in the middle, and then tying it to the inside here. You can kind of see the beautiful interiors of the building. Just very strong Art Deco influence. The hallways with the swirly marble going down the middle, kind of a purplish hue with the limestone in there, the decorative curvilinear. This building was the location of this. This is the Playboy headquarters. It started in 1965 and originally part of what was called the Palmolive building. The next one here is 1 North LaSalle, and this one, when you look at the details on the outside, there's a lot of details, a lot of dirt. This one really needs to be cleaned up, I think. This is one of the last Art Deco buildings. It's one of the last great Chicago skyscrapers during that era. But you can kind of see the step back design. If you look at the intricate details in the exterior with the facade there, the patterns. This is the entryway. You have the revolving doors, but huge vertical patterns of gold, kind of floral patterns going across the top. This is the inside lobby. Basically, you can see the details of the ceiling on the left, the intricate details of the ceiling, the grill patterns across the top there, and over at the right, kind of the stairway there. The masterpiece in this building is the elevator lobby. It is just incredible. Here's one shot. It just shows you all the intricacy detail of the multi-elevators in that lobby. You can see the intricate details of the light fixtures, kind of dealing with the floral kind of bird patterns. I've got some different shots of this. This is it here on just how polished those doors are. You can kind of see the different hues around the lighting. Again, all the ceiling detail. Kind of a close-up of the doors on the left. And even when you open those doors and you go inside the elevator room there, very Egyptian feel. You got the little like symbols up at the top with the kind of that reddish brown paneling there. Just a really beautiful building with a beautiful elevator lobby. Here's some other pictures. Try to get close-up pictures of the birds, the sculptures, the wings of the birds, all creating that lighting effect. The Adler Planetarium, too, is another example of Art Deco. And what's interesting about the planetarium is that Max Adler, he was a president at Sears Roebuck and Company, and he had visited astronomical museums in Germany, and he wanted one in Chicago. So he donated the whole museum, and they hired a famous sculptor, Italian sculptor by the name of Alfonso Iannelli from Italy, and he created 12 panels on the outside, all containing these sculptural stylized depictions of the zodiac signs, all done in a flair of the Art Deco. And then there's actually 8 plaques kind of depicted there in the lower right, 8 plaques inside that are mythological characters representing each of the 8 planets at the time. You know, we have 9 planets, but Pluto wasn't invented at the time, so they have 8 plaques there. And this tied into the area that was the focus for the 1933 World's Fair, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. And our last big building here, which is pretty much the staple of Chicago, is the Chicago Board of Trade building. And when we talk about Egypt or the effects of the pyramids or the Sphinx, it comes to mind when I look at LaSalle Street Canyon. The canyons there, the way that it's formed, the building almost looks like a huge pyramid to Chicago. And famous on this building is the huge figurine. It's a 3-story figurine up at the top, which is the statue of Ceres. Ceres is over on the right. Ceres was the goddess of grain, and that goddess of grain was involved in all of the building was all the trades of Chicago, and it's also depicted in the main sculpture there above the clock on the left. With you have figures holding grain and figures holding corn, and then in the middle again you have a depiction of sort of like a Egyptian type of bird or a bird figure, which ties into the whole Art Deco. The figure has always been controversial, the Ceres, because Ceres is faceless, and the artist at the time or sculptor didn't want to pay attention to the detail because the feeling was that nobody would ever see that face, not recognizing that technology would change with lenses, zooming in lenses or cameras, or people in other skyscrapers kind of looking out there. The inside of this building, they basically, it was run down for a long period of time, and Chicago and a lot of investors actually just restored this whole internal architecture to the original Art Deco grandeur that it once was. They basically had a lot of historic photos, and they basically replicated all of the fixtures, all of the details kind of meticulously. This is the huge atrium in the center of the building when you enter. It's kind of like a huge multi-story atrium. You can kind of see looking up there these beautiful black granite polished marble columns, a lot of the curvilinear design similar to the Palmolive building, the vertical gold patterns, beautiful. Another shot of it here when you walk into the building. They basically had a beautiful Art Deco type of light fixturing that goes over there on the far side up across the top of the ceiling. So pretty much when the Depression hit in the late 1930s, Art Deco really became more subdued because the Depression, everything started being expensive, and everybody tried to monitor costs and everything. And Art Deco still was all the rage during the 1933 Century of Progress exposition that took place at Northerly Island. And this is Northerly Ireland in the lower right there. And despite its name, the fair was less about the retelling of Chicago's first 100 years, but it was more a showcase for modern living, consumers, and entertainment. And all of the need of this fair was to try to drive the need to kind of stimulate spending to get out of the Great Depression. The Great Depression, unfortunately, had a great impact on Art Deco because everything being elaborate was also very expensive. So thus there was more a future approach of modernizing buildings to make them a little more basic because of that impact of the Great Depression. The Century of Progress here had many lasting architectural impacts on Chicago. It actually introduced millions of people to a newly created lakefront land near the museum campus. And here you have the area there in the area. This is what it looked like in 1933. And this was kind of the last hurrah days for Art Deco. It pretty much kind of made a statement that Art Deco, with its beautiful flair for the beautiful architectural styles of Chicago, the elaborate everything that was presented at the 1933 World's Fair, it basically stands the test of time, Art Deco, to this day, 90 years later. And what's really nice about it is how they are taking these buildings and how they're taking care of them, and they're investing millions of dollars to renovate them just to make them really beautiful. So really, in closing here for this presentation, as I kind of researched this project, I was actually amazed of what you see, what Chicago has to offer in these type of designs and these buildings. And a lot of people, they don't have an awareness of this. One thing I recommend, which I've been doing, is I sign up for some, Chicago has some beautiful architectural tours. They're not that expensive. It gives you a good flair for those of you that are really, liking the buildings of these different ages. And what I try to do is capture a lot of it in the photos and kind of bring it back to the presentation. So I saw this quote in closing that I thought was appropriate, but it says, when you see beautiful all around you, beauty will seek and find you, kind of even in the most unexpected places. So with that, I conclude my presentation. I want to thank everybody, and I'll turn it over back to Erin and see if anybody has any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
If anyone has questions for Ken, please put them in the chat and we will get to them. I'm also going to launch an attendance poll. If you would please respond how many people are viewing tonight. So while we wait for some questions, I would just like to say my own comment, which that was amazing. I mean, so cool. Your photos are really cool. It was, like you said, you walk down the streets of Chicago, you walk down the streets of wherever you're at, and you don't know what is on these buildings, especially I'm 5 feet tall. I will never, with my own eyes, see a lot of those things.
Yes.
So I so appreciate you pointing them out, and the detail that these architects put into these buildings is just phenomenal, and sad if it goes underappreciated, I would say. Let's see if I don't know if I don't see any questions, but we have comments saying, very nice. Thank you. This was very interesting. Thank you, Ken. So comprehensive. Do you have a favorite building? Is a question.
Oh, that's a great question. I would say, well, the one that blew me away was the elevator lobby in that One North LaSalle building. Boy, when you walk in there and you see that in person, that was just really impressive. That's the one with the bird light fixtures. Also, what they're doing over at that Board of Trade building inside, when you see that massive renovation going on, I probably would say my favorite is the Board of Trade building, because it's kind of that monumental structure that has so much tied to like ancient, it's like an ancient pyramid type of thing. It's in that LaSalle Canyon, which gives it a whole different effect. But when you go inside and you see the millions of dollars they've invested there to just make that a historic place in Chicago, even though it's not an active Board of Trade anymore. They actually have a museum in there too. I haven't gone there, but they've got a new museum about the history of the Board of Trade. I'd say that probably is one of my favorites.
Wow, cool. Another person is asking, besides downtown, are there any other notable Art Deco buildings that you can know of?
Yeah, the main ones were the ones I talked about up on the Gold Coast. There are a couple of buildings on the south side, but there's like little elements like all over the city, but nothing of the grand scope of how it all comes together with the buildings that I kind of pointed out between what's going on the Gold Coast and what's going on downtown. Some theaters also, some old movie theaters, a lot of them. I had that presentation on movie theaters. Some of those had some Art Deco flares to it. But at the time in the city, it was very unfortunate. Back in the 60s and 70s, there wasn't a really huge awareness going on for preserving a lot of the buildings. So a lot of the beautiful buildings actually got demolished, and they got demolished for parking or supermarkets. And there was a huge awareness in the 90s that, hey, these are really historic, and there's been a lot of emphasis on raising money to bring a lot of these places back to their grandeur, because they're kind of like walking museum pieces.
Yeah, they really are. Someone's asking if you know if the Palmer House is Art Deco.
Good question. The Palmer House did not come up as a top. Palmer House is beautiful. There's a lot in there. It has a different flair to it that's not really strongly Art Deco themed. So it's not there if I remember, there are some elements in there that might be Art Deco, but the overall grandeur of that was kind of tied to the earlier era of Chicago and like the a lot of the classical stuff versus Art Deco.
And do you know if which or any of these buildings are open to the public?
The majority of the buildings that I showed you are all open to the public. Um, the ones that I could not get into is like that old post office building because it's kind of like an event venue. But the, the recommendation I have is there's two great tours that are going on with the city for the Chicago architecture tour, and there's two of them that are tied to Art Deco specifically. And there's an advantage when you go with a guide from the Architectural Association because a lot of what I notice is a lot of the buildings they're kind of hard to get in there and take pictures or see things because there's a lot of like security going on with the security guards, or in some cases there's actually people that monitor that the only people that come in should be like residents. But when you go in there as part of a group tour with the architectural firm, they kind of know you're coming. They know what times they are during the week, and they offer them I think like three different times each week. Each one there's one called I think Art Deco along the river, and then there's one called Art Deco downtown, and you know the lecture piece is kind of generic, but what it does allow you to get into a lot of these buildings, and that's what I did here. Is I actually went on both those tours, and I took a lot of these pictures because I was allowed to do that because I was with that tour.
Oh, great. Um, do you have an idea when Art Deco went out of style?
Yes. So the pretty much at the end of the probably World War II, uh, put a damper on everything. Um, so it was very strong in the 20s. It was very strong in the 30s in that fashion statement. But then when World War II hit, kind of in similar fashion to what I talked about with World War One, a lot of emphasis changed after that war to become more basic, more modern, and that's when the new form came in, which was all this postmodernism, or there's a term out there called brutalism. Brutalism is basically very plain, simple, less expensive structures that are made out of concrete and everything. So the whole phase of art kind of changed with buildings at that time. And not a lot of building, hardly any building went up at all during the 1940s because of the prelude to the World War II and the aftermath of World War II. So there was like this vacant period where Art Deco came in uh, all the way through the 30s, and then there was like a complete stop of a lot of activity with buildings through that whole 1940s decade. And it started picking back up in the 1950s, but then that's when modernism came in.
Wow. Yeah. And that makes sense too with some of the examples you use, like The Great Gatsby from that time period. And even those comic books were probably originated around that
Yeah,
time period.
what I noticed, and that probably was a very interesting. I always find that time I must have been really interesting to live in Chicago back in the 1920s because the more I review and research, it was all about elegance, extravagance, uh, money floating around. They did it with their clothes and their jewelry and the buildings, and all of that was going great until the Great Depression hit in 1929, and then everybody ended up being devastated. And the aftermath of that was, oh, let's how do we get things to be more cost conscious again? How that the focus of that fair in 1933 was more about how can we try to bring revenue and people back out of this whole horrible depression era.
Yes.
It's kind of interesting.
Um, so your previous question about are these open to the public? Someone has commented that Open House Chicago is great to see many places in Chicago and surrounding areas. It's annually in October.
Yes,
So Open House Chicago is capitalized. I
yes.
don't know what that is, but I would say Google it.
Great point. No, that's a great point. So there, yeah, there's a in October, there is a whole Chicago like architectural themed type of visit, like open houses, and all over Chicago in all the different neighborhoods for one weekend in October. They call it Open House Chicago, and a lot of people who are really tied to these buildings, they like to show them off, and they offer their services for free on those weekends. But that's something that you keep that in mind in October. I have not been able to hit one yet. Both Monica and I have been wanting to go to those, but we just haven't hit it yet with because it's on one particular weekend. But there's usually a schedule that comes out. I think like mid-October that will show you like what buildings will be open, and it's kind of a free event to the public, and you could go crazy because you could explore a lot of the city. There's so much to explore in the city and the different areas of it. But,
That sounds
but that,
so
that that was a good
fun.
that was a good comment. Yeah, Open House Chicago.
Cool. And then we have another question. Is it known who was making all these details and fixtures? Were they Americans or traders from Europe?
Great question. It was a whole combination of teams at the time tied to the architectural firms that did that. And the main one for Art Deco was Halliburton Brute. And if you notice that picture that I showed, that big group shot of that whole firm, there's just a lot of different people coming together to make it happen. Um, a lot of architecture and a lot of designers were coming to Chicago because Chicago had a huge opportunity because it had to rebuild everything from scratch after the fire. So it was attracting all the top talent, and the top talent was coming in from all parts of the world. Even I pointed out in one of the lectures I did, one of them was Tiffany, the guy Tiffany Glass. Uh, he's known for his glass, and he came and he personally designed some of the stained glass in a lot of the buildings, especially like the Chicago Cultural Center. But yeah, talent was being pulled all over the world.
Wow, so great. I do not see any more questions. So hopefully I didn't miss anybody, but I do see a lot of comments. Like one person says, Ken, your programs are always great. And I agree. Thank you. There are lots of thank yous. And then one commented, I need to get downtown more.
Yeah, when I recommend when you go down there, just stop, go look up, look around, look down the street. It's just incredible. And what's so neat about it is that there's so many different styles of different periods and decades. And what really amazes me the most is how they think all that out so that it makes everything look really good. I mean, that takes a lot of thinking, a lot of planning. But yeah, this just amazing what you can see. Like I don't know, me personally, until I started doing a lot of this, I was not seeing all these intricate details on these buildings, nor did I think about going in them. And it really just it's just very overwhelming. It was really a great experience.
I bet. And I myself share like that. I never really considered a lot of what you shared today. And so you have opened my world. And I look forward to noticing this stuff myself when I'm walking around downtown.
And there's so many different phases of the types of architecture design that went through. First you started with the classical, and then you went into the different Art Deco, and then you went into modernism, and then the period through the 90s, and now is all about decorative glass, and a lot of the buildings are like, basically all glass panels. And it's amazing when you go down there now and you just look at the variety of the different buildings and all the different time periods. It's really, really interesting.
It is very interesting. Thank you so much, Ken, for
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everybody.
sharing your passions with us.
Good.
Appreciate it. All right.
Okay.
Well, I
Have a
don't have any
great
more.
night.
Yeah. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you,
Bye,
Ken.
everybody.
Good night.